to another of our Wednesday yachting luncheons. It's beautiful outside our windows. Where else can you look from the luncheon table to the racing venue, just like that? And tonight we'll have racing out here, of course, for the Wednesday night series. Terry, in fact, will be driving the 82-year-old youngster, so we're looking for everybody to be looking out the windows and watching the races there. We have a great program today, and we'll start out with a little bit about future speakers. We've been thinking about saving the Delta, and although it looks like the legislation has come our way, because you'll recall that saving the Delta means saving the Bay, and we'll want to hear from one of the lawyers who helped that happen. His name is Michael Brodsky. He'll be here in September to talk all about what it took to save the Delta and to keep it from being, stolen away by giant 40-foot tubes taking water to LA. Stan Honey will be here on July 24 to talk all about the new double-handed ocean racing that will be added to the Olympics in 24. The Smithsonian's Director of Research will be here in July 10th to talk all about incredible research that they're doing on whales and porpoises and the language skills that they have. We can't talk to them, but they're talking to each other quite a bit. Jeffrey Beaumont will be here in July to talk all about his father, who was the official painter for the U.S. Navy during World War II. In June, Allison Langley will be here to talk all about a beautiful Hairstoff restoration project called the Merrily. On the 29th of May, your watch captain will be here to do a historic talk called They Came for the Gold, They Stayed for the Yachting, the Birth of Racing on San Francisco Bay. We'll start in 1840. Who knows how many people were in San Francisco in 1844? Population of 40. 1847, population of 450. In December 49, 5,000. In January 49, 5,000. By December, 25,000. And we'll talk about early gambling and gold rolling around and people betting on races. And so that'll be a fun talk. The first race in 1855. A big story in the newspaper. It was a 2-page newspaper in those days. There's going to be a yacht race, going to be a yacht race. The next day there was another story in the newspaper. Well, we had a yacht race, but we're not just sure who won. We need some rules. So that'll be a fun one to hear about. And so a little bit about our speakers today. We'll have two. Those of you who've experienced the America's Cup campaign know that it takes lots and lots and lots of people in the game, including a great Commodore, from our own club. So to give you an official welcome before we get onto the introductions, we want to bring up our great Commodore, Paul Heineken. Paul.
Thanks, Ron. I have a simple job, and that's basically to say welcome members, guests, important guests from out of town, and guests watching us online. We're going to have a wonderful talk today. I don't want to cut into their time. So thank you, Terry and Tucker, for coming on out here, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you also, Commodore, for you and Janet putting up Tucker at your place in Larkspur. How wonderful. It's fun for Tucker. He said 2 treats. I get to come to the yacht club and talk, and get to hang out with the Commodore and at their place. Tucker Thompson, who is an America's Cup commentator, started sailing as a young kid on a Sunfish 8 or 9. By the time he was 15, he was the North American champion, junior champion in that class. He won a Mum 30 regional race with our speaker today, his buddy Terry Hutchinson, later on. And in 2000, the challenge for what would be America True was filed in my fax machine from my house. Don Raleigh and I were sitting there sending the fax machine through. He would later become a mid-bow guy on that campaign and then start doing commentary for VIP boats. That's the beginning. In 2007, he would basically do commentary in Valencia. In 2013, we all heard him here in San Francisco. In 2017, he was more than that. He was really the ambassador for the America's Cup to the public in Bermuda. We listened. He did a great job down there. And now he's got this role helping create a yacht club campaign for the American Magic program. This is something like number 32 in his tour of yacht clubs across the country. And he's representing a really great sailor. when you ask Terry Hutchinson, when did he first go sailing, you're reminded that when he was inside of his mother as a pregnant lady, they took him sailing all the time. And then, of course, when he was 10 days old, they clearly had him sailing. He's 10-day-old baby. At 4 years, he remembers being in a Dyer dinghy in Maryland. At 8 years old, he's part of the regular junior sailing programs in the local Maryland yacht clubs. At 18, he starts at Old Dominion. So it's a 4-year school, and he was only the All-American 4 times. I guess that you can't get more than that. 2 of those times, he was also Collegiate Sailor of the Year. In '98, he won the J24 World Championships. Who remembers which venue? San Francisco. In 2000, he came to work for our buddy and his table mate now, and our friend Paul Kayard for the American One effort. That was great. He was the main trimmer for our effort here. He started in 2003 for Stars and Stripes. He was a tactician for Kenny Reed. In 2007, Dean Barker was the skipper, and he was a tactician for them. And in 2013, back here, working with Paul again as the helmsman for Artemis. He's an incredibly great sailor because he's only won 16 world championships. And we expect to hear incredible things with what you're going to see is an incredibly powerful campaign. The America's Cup is more than a boat race. It's a triathlon between enterprise, technology, and sailing. You have to do well in all 3 events to do really well. You have to raise vast amounts of money, and then you have to use that money very efficiently to build the very best tools. And then you have to, when the tools are all done, you have to sail the boat like with exceptional skill on the water. To welcome the guy who is the skipper and executive director of the American Magic to bring all 3 of those together, please welcome Tucker Thompson and Terry Hutchinson. Boys.
Thank you, Ron, very much. Thank you for all you do with the Wednesday Yachting Luncheons. After 14 years, I think this is number 7,000. I'm completely impressed. And before we bring Terry Hutchinson up, I just want to say I knew most of everything you said about his sailing career, but what I didn't know, and now I'm even more impressed, Terry, is that you could remember sailing with your mother in her womb. That is incredible. One thing that I also remember being here again at St. Francis Yacht Club, thank you for coming, is the 2013 America's Cup, the best natural sailing amphitheater in the world. Give yourselves a round of applause. This tour, thanks to Terry and New York Yacht Club American Magic, started earlier this year and will go through to New Zealand in 2021. It is also supported by the Moorings Company. So first I would like to point out Tom White, who is here. Tom, thank you for coming. Now this, every table has one of these. I invite you to take it home. And when I was with the Commodore this morning, and the coffee at the Commodore's house is fantastic, by the way. I highly recommend it. I'm probably going to talk 3 times fast today because of it. But I understand Janet, his wife, is organizing a group to go to Fiji. And next year, perhaps we can organize a group with the Moorings. So anyway, Tom, thank you very much. And we'll go to the opening slide, Tom, even if we could, on the Moorings. And I'd like to thank Sailing Illustrated for broadcasting this live around the world. Now, I'd also like to pass out this. If you'd like any information, Ron, you could pass it out if you don't mind, on American Magic and the upcoming 36th America's Cup in New Zealand. You can put your email down there as well. So anyway, thank you to the Moorings. I just did my first Moorings charter. There are 20 destinations around the world. We chose the BVI, one of my favorite places. And here's us, my wife and kids. First time we ever did a charter, ever. I know Paul Kayard is here today. I know you've been a big fan of Moorings before, and many of you have had a chance to go on a charter. I highly recommend the Moorings, and see Tom afterwards. So thank you guys for coming, and thank all of you this afternoon. Today, we're going to celebrate the America's Cup. And we celebrate the New York Yacht Club's long and storied history with the America's Cup, the oldest club continuously competing in the America's Cup. And in many ways, the New York Yacht Club has defined this event. And we also celebrate a team with a fresh new approach to sailing's oldest prize. Now, in a few moments, I'm going to bring up the skipper and executive director of New York Yacht Club American Magic, my good friend, Terry Hutchinson. But before we bring up Terry to take a look at the future of the America's Cup Here's a look back at its history through the words of President John F. Kennedy in his
This
opening
is the
address
trophy
on the 1962
which the
Cup.
United States has held for over a century. I know that all of us take the greatest pleasure in being here. First of all, because whether we're Australian or American, we are all joined by a common interest, a common devotion and love for the sea. I really don't know why it is that all of us are so committed to the sea, except I think it's because, in addition to the fact that the sea changes, and the light changes, and ships change, it's because we all came from the sea. And it is an interesting biological fact that all of us have in our veins the exact same percentage of salt in our blood that exists in the ocean. And therefore, we have salt in our blood, in our sweat, in our tears. We are tied to the ocean. And when we go back to the sea, whether it is to sail or to watch it, we are going back from whence we came. And therefore, it's quite natural that the United States and Australia, separated by an ocean, but particularly to those of us who regard the ocean as a friend, bound by an ocean, should be meeting today in Newport to begin this great sea competition.
Isn't that great? Those words, yes. Those words never seem to get old for those of you, of course, that have seen that. Now, the America's Cup, 168 years ago, began in 1851. During the First World's Fair, the great exhibition, Prince Albert invited nations all over the world to showcase their best technology. And that, of course, included yachting as well. So the Royal Yacht Squadron sent this flyer out inviting any nation that was competing or coming to the World's Fair to send their fastest yacht in a race around the Isle of Wight. Now, as you know, the rest of the story, only one nation answered the call, the United States, with a revolutionary pilot schooner called America, after which the trophy is named, not after the country that won it, but after the yacht that won it that day. The course was around the Isle of Wight, and while America may have been fast, a little-known fact is that her crew work was not necessarily up to par. Back in 1851, the yacht started at anchor, and at promptly 10 a.m., August 22nd, when the starting gun fired off the Royal Yacht Squadron, 14 British yachts hoisted their sails, weighed anchor, and took off, and America, embarrassingly, fouled her anchor. Terry, I hope you guys don't sail with an anchor in the next America's Cup, but they had to drop the sails, unfoul the anchor, and start again. And that's what I think is even more impressive about America's speed, is that she not only won that day, but she started from dead last and had to outsail the other 14 boats in Great Britain, then the maritime superpower. And when she finally crossed the finish line a little bit after 8 p.m., Queen Victoria, of course, asked which yacht had just won, and she was told America. And she said, "And which is second?" And you all know the line. She was told, "Your Majesty, there is no second." And that has become a line that has defined the America's Cup ever since. Now, the event has evolved quite a lot in the past 168 years, from the original schooners like America and Magic, after which this team is named, after America that won the first Cup in 1851 and Magic that won the first defense off New York in 1870. And from the schooners, the boats evolved to the cutters and sloops, and eventually the majestic J boats in 1937. And finally, in 1958, we had boats that went from 130 feet long down to only 65 feet long. And the 12-meter has always become known as the golden era of the America's Cup off Newport, Rhode Island. Now, in 1983, perhaps the most important date in the America's Cup, that's when Australia, too, finally beat the Americans, the longest winning streak in the history of world sports. And in many ways, it was good because it opened the Cup up to the rest of the world, and it proved that America is beatable. And we're kind of over that now. So, Terry, let's rewrite history and bring it back. No pressure. Now, there have been 3 valiant attempts by the New York Yacht Club to win back the America's Cup, bring it back to where it rightfully began, beginning with 1987 in Australia 2 off Perth, and then again in 2000, Young America down in New Zealand. Now, those of you that are naval architects in the room will recognize quite closely that this is not how the boat was designed to go upwind that day. Didn't win that race, in case you're wondering. And then finally, 2003, the last America's Cup challenge from the New York Yacht Club, unsuccessful, unfortunately. That time, Dennis Conner was back at the helm in New Zealand. Now, the evolution of the speed, the design of these boats has changed more in the past decade than in all the previous 150 years combined. The last time we saw a traditional monohull, Valencia in 2007, Terry was there sailing with Emirates Team New Zealand. He doesn't like me to bring up this memory for him, but it was a 1-second loss to Alinghi, who defended again. And then in 2013, Alinghi went on to race Oracle Racing in a deed of gift match. Best of 3 match, and Oracle Racing prevailed and brought the cup right back here, as you know, to San Francisco. And that's where this story began. In 2013, as all of you, I mean, there probably isn't a person in this room that didn't witness that cup right here. It was an incredible event in San Francisco, and that dramatic comeback with Oracle Racing down 8, or Oracle Team USA down 8-1 to Emirates Team New Zealand in a first to win 9. All they had to do, the Kiwis, is win 1 more match, and then Oracle Team USA found some extra gas in the tank, if you will, and won race after race after race to win the cup. It's been called the biggest comeback in the history of world sports, at least mathematically, and only the New England Patriots tend to disagree with that statistic. But because they won, and you all know this second part of the story, the cup left San Francisco. This time it went offshore to Bermuda, the first time a U.S. defender has ever sailed the event outside of the United States. And for those of you that were there, Bermuda did quite an amazing job as well. But the Kiwis finally prevailed, and it was a well-earned victory. You know, they came in and kept their heads down, focused on one thing. In fact, every time they got an interview in the media, they simply said, we're here for one reason, to take the cup away. And that they did. They did it by out-innovating, out-thinking, and quite honestly, out-sailing Oracle Team USA. I think even Oracle Team USA's previous team members would agree. They got outclassed. So all credit to the Kiwis. The America's Cup is headed back to Auckland, New Zealand, the city of sails, and for good reason. They've hosted the Cup twice before, and no doubt this time again in 2021, they'll put on quite a great show for the rest of the world. And that is where our team begins this story. New York Yacht Club, American Magic. And my good friend, Terry Hutchinson, is the skipper and executive director of the team. This is a man, as Ron mentioned to you, has won 16 world championships. He's been a 2-time College Sailor of the Year, 2-time Rolex Yachtsman of the Year, and now he's in his 5th America's Cup campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Terry Hutchinson. So Terry, as Ron mentioned, your story very much began here in San Francisco.
Yeah. Well, the first thing, I don't think any of us really knew, Ron, that you were actually entering the challenge from across the bay. You know, it's probably something I would have kept in the cone of silence. Paul and I looked at each other and thought, huh, I wonder when that happened. Yeah, but Tucker, sorry. As you rightfully pointed out, my America's Cup career started here thanks to Paul and America One. You know, it was, yeah, I mean, it was one of those experiences. I was hired to trim the main. And I'm certain we could have had a better main trimmer, but thanks for sticking with it. We sailed a great Louis Vuitton. Ended up, you know, coming up on the short end of the stick. But it was one of those experiences that for a first timer into the game, you really couldn't ask for a better opportunity to sail with the people that we were sailing with. And so in that regard, it kind of set the baseline and really set the trajectory for where we're headed and how we, you know, how we hope to go. So thanks for that, Paul. It wouldn't have happened without you taking it on and hiring us. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a great regatta. It was a really, really good regatta. We sailed really, really well. And, you know, there was a demonstration of, you know, kind of mental toughness that when you look back at it is one of those things that we carry forward in today's racing. So it was really good.
Well, we thank you, Paul, for getting his America's Cup career started. And now, fast forward to this year, 2019, New York Yacht Club, American Magic. How did the team come about, and tell us about the principles behind it?
Well, we're pretty lucky. You know, Hap Fouth is the owner of Bellamente. In 2017, right after the Kiwis
had won, we were in Greece at a 72 regatta, and we started the discussion about about participating, in particular if it was a monohull, and that led to the same conversation that we had with Doug. And in August of 2017, we got together in Minneapolis at HAP's office and kind of hashed out the whole idea of how we wanted to go about it. We needed to very quickly identify who we were going to represent, and from both Doug's and HAP's perspective, there was really only one choice with the New York Yacht Club, and they were the third principal or the third partner to come into this, and really without New York's vision and support, I doubt we would be where we are today. And then finally, Mr. Penske came in, and as we know, Roger just had a great weekend last weekend, winning his 18th Indianapolis 500. I think to date, Penske Racing is up to about 510 wins. And if there's one thing that he knows how to do, it's win. He showed up at our Christmas party, said, "Guys, I don't know anything about sailing, but I know how to win." And pretty much every Sunday or Saturday, we get to see that on display. And so we're incredibly lucky to not only have their financial support, but to really have the leadership that they provide in different aspects of the day in and day out managing of the program. Doug and Hap are great sailors in their own right, with world championships between them. And Roger obviously is a great champion in a different venue, but interestingly enough, the same theories and the same processes apply to winning with his cars that we're trying to apply to winning the America's Cup. So in that regard, we're incredibly fortunate.
So in addition to trying to win the America's Cup, one thing that impresses me is your vision for the America's Cup, to bring the Cup back to America and bring America back to the Cup. Explain that for us.
Yeah, I think what you see really in all three of our principals, and one of the things that they're passionate about is returning the United States and really our marine industry to the top of the sport. I think as Tucker pointed out earlier, we've been taking it in the chops a little bit on the international racing and development. The Team New Zealand and the Kiwis as a whole have been leading the way for, you could probably say since 1995 when they unearthed the thing and took it down to New Zealand. And so really our vision is to establish a culture, establish a work ethic, and establish a mentality that really helps reestablish the United States as a leader in the marine world and really on the international racing circuits.
You were telling us last night, for those of us that are lucky to be here, why you also want to inspire the next generation of American sailors, that America's Cup culture and competitive sailing culture within the United States. Tell us how you plan to do that with the grassroots partnerships that you set up.
Well, if you look at U.S. sailing right now as a whole, we have the optimists over here. We have the kids that roll out of that into the Olympic Development Program. They go to college sailing. They come out of college. They can choose the Olympics, or they can choose some of these great foundations like Oak Cliff, like Iris, that really mentor kids and teach them marine trades. We're incredibly proud of really both the Oak Cliff and the Iris partnerships. We have 12 kids inside American Magic that have come out of the Iris boat building school that are working and building on our boats. And so that in itself is a great indication that the partnership is working. Out of Oak Cliff, we have two young brains, really. We have a girl who graduated from MIT, Robin Lesh, and Sean O'Halloran. But Robin is in charge of all the weights that go inside the boat. And, it's just such a great influence to have her type of energy in and amongst a bunch of meathead designers. She comes in to work every single day. She's incredibly smart, but she just brings a good vibe to something that is difficult to do and helps keep it all real. And in the end, everything that goes into the boat goes across Robin's desk. So as a 25-year-old young woman, she has an incredible amount of responsibility to our team. And so what you see with these partnerships and what we're doing is really working to help elevate and give the younger generation the opportunity. I think for us to really fulfill what we want to do, we have to win the regatta. If we get 80% of the way there, but we don't win the regatta, we'll come up short. And yet really the opportunity to execute fully will be when we have the opportunity to defend. So
to win the Cup, to win this next regatta in New Zealand in 2021, of course you have to have the fastest boat. In the America's Cup, the fastest boat has always won. It's a game of design and innovation first and foremost. So tell us about this new boat, the AC-75. It is a monohull, but it's also foiling. And foiling technology started back in the 1950s. The U.S. Navy was pioneering it, and as you can see, it has evolved quite a bit to this day. These guys have been sailing this boat all winter long. It's been called the fastest monohull in the world. I've been trying to get the speeds out of Terry all year, and he's still tight-lipped about it. But tell us about how this boat relates to the new America's Cup class.
Well, the mule itself was conceived out of the idea to help teach the sailors really what we were getting ourselves into. And it's 100 mils shy of being exactly 50% scale of what the 75 is. But the boat quickly grew from a sailing lesson to a full team lesson in how we were going to put the boat in the water day in and day out, operate the sailing operations, the design operation. You can take the interior and the guts out of this boat and put it into the AC-75 and go sailing. So very quickly, our proof of concept has become a development tool for the entire team. You know, the AC-75 itself is going to be a reasonably impressive piece of equipment. I would suspect that, you know, in the mule we go, you know, somewhere in the low to mid 40s as top speeds, but you know, I would think that the 75 is going to achieve, you know, mid to high 50s pretty easily with the stability that the boat generates. And you know, really from that point, you know, I would suspect that it's also going to be quite a handsful. You know, having seen the boat and watching the boat being built and seeing what this 75-foot beast looks like when it gets in the water and starts sailing, it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be different. That's for certain.
Well, let's talk about sailing it. And what's impressive about your design team, and to be fair, no one in the world yet has seen these boats, these foiling monohulls work. They've seen them sail before. So you guys put the mule in the water last October in off of Newport, Rhode Island. Here's a look. Keep in mind, this is the first day of sailing for a boat that the team had never seen. How cool is that? So I like to ask every audience that we show these videos to, and to be fair, there are 3 different camps, and I'm just curious, as a cross-section of the sailing audience, here in San Francisco, how many want to go back to, I know Tom's answer, monohulls, normal traditional monohulls, okay? How many want to go back to the catamarans that we saw here in San Francisco, 2013? How many think this is the way to go, the new foiling monohull? How many are just didn't really want to? It is really exciting. Deed of gift, if we could go back to that. You know, I'm often asked, where's the future headed? If you look at the past evolution, the curve was very short. You know, basically the boats were going the same speed for 150 years, and then it shot straight up. So I think in the next 10 years, you guys are probably going to go to Mars, orbit around it, and fly back into space. I mean, they look like space outfits now with the helmets and the oxygen tanks and all the rest of it. But the mule, you've already mentioned that this is a 50% scale model of a boat we haven't seen yet, the AC-75. What can you learn from this boat, and how much of an advantage is it for you guys to be sailing it, particularly considering the foil arms are late and the other teams are not sailing this boat?
Well, yeah, I mean, is it an advantage? How would you know? We're not living day in and day out in the other teams. For what we needed to do to develop, we had to, there were certain parts of the American Magic team that we were confident in. We were confident in the sailing operations. We were confident in how we were going to race. But the other side of the team, we didn't really have a good feel for how we were going to all operate together. And so we needed to be in an environment that from day one, we put ourselves under pressure and we put ourselves under deadlines to meet, to learn where we were going to be weak. And at that moment, we can continue then to improve and make ourselves better day in and day out in the operation. As Tucker just mentioned, the foil arms that are being produced by the Challenger of Record will be delivered later in the month of July, early August. And so understanding that we were meant to be sailing boat one late March, early April of this year, it's turned out to be quite, quite a good little bonus for us, because it's given us more time to learn about systems inside the boat. It's given us more time to develop foil concepts, to develop sails, to develop trimming concepts, to the point now that every part of equipment that goes onto boat one or boat two will go through the mule first, and gives us the opportunity to test and develop there before we have to play that card into the big boat. And then from there, sailing the thing has just been, it's one of those experiences that early on in the piece, actually a local Mill Valley resident, Sean Clarkson, he sits in front of me, I'm sitting behind him, and I'm breathing heavy in his ear. And he's like, "Terry, what are you doing back there?" And I said, "Well, don't take this the wrong way, Sean. You're not that good looking." But it's quite exciting. I mean, the adrenaline that you get it's quite a rush. And then you start slowing down and you go mid-30s instead of low 40s, and you start looking around going, "Come on, guys, what are we doing here? We got to get this thing going." And so it's all relative, but it is turning out to be one of these tools that, whether we were lucky in guessing that things were going to be delayed, or it just happened to play out that way, it's going to be quite a beneficial tool.
So you launched this boat October of last year in Bristol, Rhode Island. You trained at the New York Yacht Club summer home in Newport. Then you went down to Pensacola, and I know you looked at venues all over the country.
Yeah.
I don't know if San Francisco was on the short list, but what have you guys been doing in Pensacola, and why is that such a beneficial venue?
Yeah, well, Pensacola Bay, it's a lot like San Francisco Bay. I mean, it's San Francisco in a flood tide. It's reasonably flat water. It's an unobstructed wind field. There's pretty wide open bay. It's 2 miles across and 6 miles long, and so you get a reasonably good runway. And then when you feel like it, you can go out into the Gulf of Mexico, and you got about 1,000 square miles of testing. And it's been one of those things. Again, we were a bit fortunate in how we ended up there, because it's a little bit cold in December and January. But the actual venue itself has been incredible. The sailing, the ability to test day in and day out. We've kind of gotten to a point where it's become so reliable with the breeze that we plan our days based on forecasts when we need to target something that we're going to develop, or we end up sailing too much. But yeah, it's been an absolute blessing in disguise.
I got a chance to see the team training 2 weeks ago for the first time, my first time in Pensacola, and it just happened to be the day that the Blue Angels buzzed the team.
Yeah.
It was incredible to see the world's best pilots and the world's best sailors in one place at one time. That was quite special, and I know they've come down to the base and sort of watched how you guys approach training, and there hopefully will be some more crossovers to that. But what everyone wants to know next, I'm sure that I know I did when I went down there, and I probably still never get a chance to know, is what it is like sailing on board the fastest monohull in the world. Here's a look.
Our season in Pensacola has completely exceeded expectations. This place is it's a great place to sail. It's flat water, plenty of breeze, hasn't been too cold, and you know, the people are good here. They've been treating us really well, and you know, we couldn't be happier to be here.
Pensacola has been amazing. I think it exceeded all of our expectations. We had no idea that it was going to be 5 miles straight across, no obstructions, flat water, and great breeze this whole winter. And I think everybody was very pleasantly surprised.
We've obviously got a huge list of things to work our way through, and being a new class and a very new concept is pretty much every day there's something to learn, and so it's really valuable for the team as a whole to be able to go through the process of getting the boat on the water every day, and we get the good part to go out and sail it. So it's a lot of fun, and the conditions here in Pensacola have just been fantastic.
Today was a kind of a classic Pensacola day. Plenty of breeze from the get-go, and it's just a nice big racetrack that we can kind of stretch out in and do everything we need and get everything we need testing-wise. But it's challenging enough that it keeps us on our toes.
It's my first time foiling really on a larger boat than a Moth, and for me it's a pretty unreal experience. A lot softer than what I'm used to. A lot smoother ride and a lot faster. It's pretty cool what you can do with 10 knots and flat water.
The 38 is our best shot at getting a feel for what the pain points are going to be around the racetrack, and we're trying to put ourselves under pressure every day to make sure that we're learning the hard points of sail and the hard corners, and so this boat's just a great tool for that.
It's a very interesting boat. The dynamic of it is very different from the catamarans, which is it's a great challenge, and from a competitive standpoint you just sort of really enjoy the challenge of learning what the boat's all about and how it behaves, and all the things that it likes to do and doesn't like to do. You learn the hard way at times, but it's also very rewarding when things start to come together. The speeds are pretty phenomenal, and I think with the 75 we're going to see some pretty exciting action, but it's still a ways away, and I look forward to getting there eventually.
I don't think you can get much cooler than that. For those of us, Terry, that are mere mortals, what is that experience like, if you could describe it? And also, if those of you, I'm sure, did not miss that one shot, these boats have no keel. They capsize quite a bit, don't they?
Well, they do capsize, hopefully not quite a bit. We've had our biggest mistakes actually spiking off the tow. The boat's not all that great when it's going 6.5 knots, but at 36 knots, it's pretty stable and reasonably easy to control. Like you, Tucker, I'm a mere mortal, so for me, I sit in the bow of the boat and I trim the jib and take sail photos and listen to Dean and Goody and Andrew talk about how the boat's performing. The things that stand out to me the most is really that speed loop, the communications that the guys have, how natural it is for them. All three of them. Dean's been involved in all the high speed foiling cups. Paul Goodison's Olympic gold medalist, 3-time Moth world champion, was the wing trimmer at Artemis in 2017, and Andrew, who's the foil trimmer, was with Oracle in the last program. And so each one of these sailors has the unique experience of ripping around at 45 knots, and it's very natural for them. For me, it's a little bit unnatural. I sit there and kind of cower a little bit, and you realize you have to respect the boat that you're sitting on, and yet it's awesome to listen to them talk back and forth with the coach boat when we're sailing at 35 knots and adjustments that they can make. And then just like we would on our boats, on Ron's IOD, you can make a little adjustment and you can see the speed change, be it at 4.5 knots or 44.5 knots. And so that side of it, I think, is the most exciting because, you know, in the end, our gain's going to come out of our people, and watching it and listening it and seeing it is makes you very optimistic. But the boat itself is very cool.
I'm jealous just looking at that. It is incredibly exciting to watch as well, and I hope all of you get a chance to watch either the America's Cup World Series events, which we'll talk about in a minute, or the America's Cup in 2021 in New Zealand. But before we open it up to the audience, Terry, and I know there's a lot of questions on everybody's mind, tell us about the schedule. You guys have left Pensacola,
Correct.
And where are you headed?
So the boat, we wrapped up on the 17th of this month in Pensacola Bay, and the boat and all the sailing gear is in Newport already. We're setting up our summer residency in Newport. We've got great support out of the Hinckley Boatyard, and we have our tent and our sailing facility there. We have our boat building facility in Bristol, Rhode Island, where the team works and builds the boat. And we're there until probably Halloween, and then we go back down to Pensacola through the winter. The first AC World Series is meant to be in middle of April in Cagliari, Italy. So boat one will leave there, and then we'll go on a 3-regatta road show through August of 2020, and then down to New Zealand for the final push. And so there's a lot of moving parts right now, and one of our primary focuses is making sure that we can continue to maximize our time on the water and minimize the downtime, which is the unique feature of running the mule and the big boat at the same time. So we should never really have to stop sailing.
I think it's an exciting opportunity for anybody that can get to Newport this summer. You've got to see this boat up close in person. It's the same way I felt when I saw the 72s here for the first time. So if you get a chance, please come to Newport. And as Terry always says, if you do come out on the water to watch,
yeah, I'd probably stay behind us because it's a little bit loose if you get in front of us. Yeah, that's the funniest, just true story out of Pensacola Bay. We were ripping along, and you know, it has a nice little channel that people come in out of the Gulf of Mexico. And we're sitting there having lunch, and this gentleman comes by in his little 13-foot fishing boat, a little open aluminum fishing boat. He's got his 35-foot Mercury, 2 darters in the bow of the boat, and the Italians are there spying on us. He comes by us and he goes, "Hey, that's Luna Rossi over there. That's Jimmy Spittle's bitch. You want me to go over and sink him?" True story. But that is the mentality of Pensacola Bay. And it's absolutely awesome. It's absolutely who you want on our side. So it's yeah, I'd stay behind us, so I guess that was the point.
There's always a moment where Terry just gets unfiltered. Yeah. We just went there, you know. And not, in addition to Pensacola, someone asked last night how they can support the team. Well, now you know. Anyone from St. Francis Yacht Club knows what to do if you see the Italians out on the water. But in all seriousness, you can follow this team. We hope you do follow the team through the America's Cup World Series, eventually in New Zealand in 2021. Of course, on social media, the website is AmericanMagic.com, rather, and the team store where you can get the gear. There's many ways to follow this team. And now I'd like to bring Ron Young back up, and he's going to have a Q&A with the audience and let you guys ask the hard questions, the tough ones. See if you can stump Terry Hutchinson, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Tucker. Thank you. Well done.
Welcome again to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from St. Francis Yacht Club. Our guests today have been America's Cup commentator Tucker Thompson and the skipper and executive director of American Magic from the New York Yacht Club, Terry Hutchinson. So Terry, you're not just the skipper, you're the executive director. You're in charge of the whole shooting match. Yeah. Give us a sense about the day in the life of Terry Hutchinson during this campaign.
Yeah.
What time you get up? What do you do?
What do I do? You know, it's actually one of the unique things that we continue to do is I push pretty hard to stay involved in the sailing. We're really fortunate that we have 130 people on the team, of which right now 19 are sailors, but we have an incredible senior leadership from Marcelino Bottine, who's the principal hull designer, to Silvio Arrivabene, who's the production manager, through Rob Ouellette, who's our operations officer, and so on and so forth. And so for me, I work pretty hard to stay focused on the sailing, because that's where I know where the rubber's going to meet the road and where we have to execute in the regatta. And so as much as I possibly can be, I'm immersed in the sailing team, get up with the sailors, we train, we do everything that you have to do. And, you know, you spend as much time as you can on the boat learning, really. So when it comes time to support and facilitate the things that we need to win the regatta, I understand it and can go to bat for the cause.
So your overall responsibility is to win the cup. Talk about the buckets of responsibility. How much time are you spending on design issues? How much time are you spending on production issues, team issues?
Well, it is a design competition, and without question, if we don't have a fast boat, we won't win the regatta. And so in the early days of this program, a lot of our decisions that we made were to fast track relationships, not having to learn people, and to use, I guess you'd say, things inside of our comfort zone, people inside of our comfort zone. So we hired the Botín partners from Santander, Spain, and Marcelino's done 5 TP52s for us that we've won world championships in, and just designed the Bellamente and has a proven track record. But more importantly, we have about a decade of history working together. And so that allowed us to just jumpstart that side of it. From there, you know, this time a year ago, we didn't really have a production facility. We didn't have the mule, and Silvio was tasked with putting together a build team. We're incredibly fortunate to have a lot of the senior builders from the Comanche in Tim Hackett and Brandon Litton that have come and helped really fast track the building side of it. And you know, really day in and day out, it's about execution. And so the mule allows us that opportunity to learn how we're going to execute. But it's also a great example of kind of where we're at as a team, in the fact that, you know, from a year ago, we had nothing, to sitting here today, we've had 64 days in the mule on the water. And so that's no more complicated than people just doing their jobs and having the right people in the spots to see that we can execute. And as I said earlier, each day is about evaluating where we're strong and where we're weak. And what you can see after 64, 65 days of sailing the mule is exactly where we are weak and where we have to get better.
So the Italians and some of them are taking the approach of using simulation. And you're watching the Kiwis and the Italians using simulators. What's the difference between what you can learn when you're actually in a prototype, even the British smaller prototype, versus simulation?
Well, it's hard to speak to what they're doing. I mean, for American Magic, our concept starts with the engineers and the designers developing something that they think is going to be fast. And from there, it goes to the simulator for Dean and the guys to run it through its iterations and to see if it actually is fast. From there, they go back and redesign it and work on the improvements. And once we get it to a spot where we're happy, then it gets built and it goes in the mule. And from there, it'll go into the race boat. The beauty of having both avenues is it allows you to verify the science, and it also allows you to verify what you can and can't do with the boat, which is something that we're learning right now. And so that's how we're choosing it. And the other teams that have maybe been around a little bit longer and have more confidence in their simulator will choose a different path. But you know, I would say that this event's much different than the last one. You know, here you have a hull that's open to design. You have sails open to design. You have foils open to design. In the previous event, there were 3 of the major components that were one design. And so it was easier to do things in simulation. Here, I would suspect it's going to be a little bit tougher.
Preview for us the dimensions of the AC-75. You know, draft, foils up, foils down, beam, foils out, foils down.
That's a lot there, Ron.
I know, 4-point question.
I'm going to go with it 75 feet. Actually, it's 68 feet, and the prod is another 7 feet out there. The boat has to weigh, it has a weight of 7,600 kilos, and 7,600 is the max weight, and it can be 30 kilos tolerance inside that. The foil arms are provided pieces of equipment. Then the last 600 millimeters of the foil arm are open to design and open to interpretation by the teams. From there, I'll probably pass on on the dimensions of everything else.
So how far out of the water are you sailing the current mule? We are looking at, it looks like 4 or 5 feet-ish. What's the deal?
Yeah.
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 Secure.
Yeah.
Since we've been watching, many of us are old enough to remember dial-ups, dial-downs in 12s and other monohulls.
Yeah.
Now you're in a monohull, but if you slow down if you go too slow, you drop out of the water. So what's the minimum speed to keep it foiling? Another good question. We're not talking.
Well, what I'll tell you is, from a racing perspective, they haven't defined what the rules of the regatta are going to be yet. Team New Zealand's put out what the course is going to be for the match and what that's going to look like. To your point, the mule is a little bit different than the 75. I would suspect the 75 takes off in 8.5 knots of wind speed, and the mule, because it's a little bit heavier in scale, takes a little bit more to get up and going. But once it's up in 9.5, 10.5 knots of wind speed, you can stay up on the foil relatively easy. So, but there's a lot of technique into learning how, in particular, to maneuver the boat. When you see in the video, you see the boat capsize. That's sailor error right there, and that's there's functions that have to happen for the maneuver to be successful. And when you make a mistake, that's the domino effect.
How fast is the boat moving through the water before it jumps up or when it jumps up?
Nah.
No.
Next question, Ron.
What's the most
Dolph,
vulnerable?
are you listening?
Most vulnerable point of sail on the boat.
Most vulnerable point of sail, spiking off the toe, because that's when the boat's going the slowest. And so when you bear away and you have to pop the boat up on the foil, you're in that crossover where the stability's not necessarily working for you yet, and the boat's down speed, and so you only have so much righting moment. Once the boat's up and out of the water and the two foils can oppose each other, then you can control the amount of righting moment that you have with the boat, depending on the leeward cant angle.
Have you mentioned publicly how many load cells are on the boat?
No, but we have a fair amount of sensors. I know when Roger comes in and looks at it and sees the amount of information that is coming off of the sailboat onto the chase boats, into the testing boats, there's over 500 data inputs.
So 30 years ago, Tom Blackhaller and Tommy Ducharme and I sailed for the first time a bow-ruddered boat near Antioch on the San Joaquin River. And we were like I said, oh my God, the first time with a bow-ruddered boat. Can you describe the first time you sailed this foiling mule and how it felt?
Well, day one, it was about 5 knots of breeze and we capsized. And we're sailing along with the code 0 on, and we tip over, and I look back at Dean and say, boy, you got a real feel for this thing. It's sitting on its side, and day 2 we hopped up on the foil, and at that moment what you kind of realize is that for me personally, it's just a whole new world, and I'm incredibly grateful to the fact of the experience that we have with some of the sailors, and really the designers and the engineers, and the carryover from the last event that's inside of American Magic. You can just see the thinking continued, and that's what it'll. That's all the teams are in that situation right now, and that's what it's going to take for us to have a crack at winning the thing.
So now we're going to take questions from the audience. Paul Kamen, naval architect, has a question. Paul.
Well, before the America even sailed for England in 1851, there was a major dispute over the yard bill. I think everyone knows the story. It was going to cost less if it wasn't the fastest boat in New York Harbor, and the syndicate staged a race with a lighter specialty boat. So big fight over the yard bill. And ever since then, there have been a series of controversies. First, it was the fleet defense, then the Dunraven challenge, then some rules issues in the 30s, and then modern history, where it seems like almost every defense or challenge has had a lot of legal battles and disputed protests and scandal associated with it. Now, I maintain that this is what has kept the America's Cup in such a high profile among the sailing public. The New York Times doesn't spill front page ink for a sailboat race in general, but if there are lawyers involved and people who are really mad about something, then it does make the front page. So my question is, what can we look forward to for the 2021 America's Cup races that will keep this level of interest up?
Yeah, I have no idea. Quite honestly, we're a little bit head down trying to stay out of it, because for the most part, those type of distractions are exactly that, and they don't really serve the performance of the boat on the water. And so, rightfully or wrongfully, we don't. There's a lot of things that we could be upset about right now happening inside the organization, but choose not to because it doesn't help us on the water. So, yeah, I'm interested in winning though. So, you have to balance all that. It doesn't serve the team to get in a bum fight with Team New Zealand or the Challenger record about stuff that actually doesn't matter.
Julia, we have followers on Facebook with questions or comments.
We do. We have one comment from early that Bob Schmitter reminds us that today is JFK's birthday.
102 years of age right now this year, right?
And Pedro Foiling Sailor from Australia says, one of the issues with most foiling boats is that when the foils ventilate, the foils go into a negative lift. The boat can pitch pole. Which strategy or training are you doing when this happens to protect the crew, airbags, seat belts, ejector belts?
Touch wood, it's all gone reasonably well. We've had a couple good stuffs, but for the most part, the boat doesn't feel as vulnerable as the catamaran did because you have a lot of volume supporting the bow of the boat, and we occasionally you do a little bit of a nosedive and the thing fills up with water, but for the most part, it's been reasonably safe. We all wear life jackets. We all have oxygen bottles. We train once a month. We get dragged around underneath the chase boats by the dive team, and they make sure that you can get your spare air in and that you're not going to drown. And it's challenging. That side of it's challenging, but not nearly as incredibly respectful of the safety side of it. But in the times that we've capsized, basically you float away from the boat, and it's pretty simple.
Our commenter has a question, Paul Honeycutt.
And maybe two. Since it's the one design piece of your boat, how many axes can you adjust on your arm? You're obviously going up and down. You're probably developing angle of attack changes with that as well. Do you have 3 axes of rotation or just 2?
So the foil arm, it lives 90% of its life at perpendicular because that's where you create the most righting moment, and so that's where it lives. It's really the foil that's in the water that controls the stability of the boat, and so you end up moving that a lot more than you do the windward one.
But do you have 2 axes of control, or can't you answer that?
Well,
or just the one?
From the foil arm,
yeah.
It's just the one.
Okay.
It's just the one.
Underwater, just the attack edge of it, like water skiing, up and down and the forward edge of it.
Sure.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. The second piece, because you're fully foiling.
They're not really into secrecy. Remember that.
I see. And I guess maybe Paul can also answer this, but it doesn't strike me that you get a lot of speed advantage by upping your size in this particular area. You're really looking at lift over drag and
yeah.
weight, and that you conceivably could make a 40-footer just as fast as a 75-footer,
yeah.
couldn't you?
Yeah, the lift and drag and how the boat behaves, those are the secret sauces to winning the regatta. The fastest boat in a straight line that's maneuverable and doesn't touch the water is probably going to be the boat that wins the regatta. And so understanding the compromise between going really, really fast in a straight line versus a little bit slower but a lot more reliable and staying out of the water, that's a pretty important component in racing the boat, with the understanding that we're basically, the race course is a football field where it's 8 mile across the top and 2.2 miles vertically. When you run into a boundary, the boat's going to have to tack. You're going to want to spend as little time as possible accelerating. But that's been one of the unique features of the mule, in that when we put marks in the water and we race around the course, you learn exactly where you're exposed and where the boat is weak and how to at least take a crack at answering those questions.
And I guess just to follow that up, you have so much more structure to make a bigger boat. Could you argue that a smaller boat could be faster?
Yeah. But I think the speed potential of the 75 in a straight line, the thing's going to be pretty impressive.
So given that the foil is out to weather and that you're going to be converging, each of you going 45, 50 miles an hour, that means a convergence speed of 70 knots toward each other. Talk to us about the sensation you're imagining by having this foil out there next to another boat. Could be you could be a weather boat and you're going to foil towards them.
Yeah, I mean, probably going to want to
Danger-
duck.
Probably want to duck.
you know,
Duck?
sliced bread comes to mind. It's quite honestly, we haven't gotten that far yet. When we do the practice racing by ourselves, what you can envision is two boats getting somewhat near each other, and then the race will start. And at that point, you're racing for speed. It was in the last event. I think what you saw with the Team New Zealand boat, in particular in the Louis Vuitton final, where Artemis led a lot from the bottom mark. The faster boat stayed in the race, and when you got to the actual match, the faster boat just basically sailed away. And so that's really the interaction between the boats happens when the slower boat's in the lead and the faster boat is just racing to keep it close and looking for the opportunity to pass.
How is the instrumentation package on this boat different from other boats? And tell us what the instrumentation package is.
It's not that much different. We look at there's displays discussing flap angles, and there's displays making sure that the cant is in the correct spot. But the rest of it is like you'd see on all the boats we race. You have two wind angles, apparent wind angles, heading, and true wind direction. And so in that regard, it's probably important to always keep in the back of their mind that you still are going to have to race the boat well. You're still going to have to sail well. Still going to have to hit wind shifts, and all the things that we do at 10 knots, you're still going to have to do well at 40 knots.
Where are the displays?
In front of you.
on the sail or on the back of the mast? No talking about that?
No, I mean,
are you going to keep them in your glasses there?
Nah, it's some the pilots actually, when the Blue Angels came over, they talked a little bit about heads-up displays and how they use them. But it's in an environment where you have to have all of your senses engaged. It's probably too much of a distraction. But a lot of the information will be down out of the wind, visible to the people that it needs to be visible to. But for the rest of us, keep your head down and grind.
With the aero package in mind, you're thinking about the aero package. A question over here. Gordon Danielson has a question. Gordon.
Hi. I think it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen to watch that boat. It's elegant. I was curious about the underwater foil restrictions. So obviously that's where the real action is in design. To what extent are you limited as to how much you can change things around there? And for example, at what point is it fixed and you're no longer able to make any modifications?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gordon. What we do know is for the 75s, we're allowed 3 sets of foils. So when we launch in August of this year, we'll have used 33% of our allotted components for that. And so at that point, we have to be strategic and smart about when we bring in the second set of foils and then again the third set of foils, understanding that the systems inside the foil are as equally as important to the boat's performance and those systems being reliable. For the match, what we do know is that we're going to race with 1 certificate, so no change. Once we declare what we're going to use for the match over the course of a 2-week period, you're going to have to live with what you brought to the regatta, and so that drives you to decision makings that helps develop a boat for 10 to 20 knots, something that's going to be a little bit more all around. Obviously that gives Team New Zealand a bit of an advantage because they can target more for a very specific time where our boat has to come through the Challenger Selection Series. And so, yeah, I mean, from the Challenger side, the rules haven't been defined yet, how many certificates we're going to be allowed to use or how many adjustments that we're going to be able to make on the day. And so at a certain point, you just stand by, keep developing.
The founder of the Science Sailing Museum has a question, Jim Hancock.
All right, this is going to be a question about culture, actually. You mentioned that part of what you were doing was trying to develop the right culture and work ethic. And in his recent book, Principles by Ray Dalio, he speaks quite a bit about developing teams and choosing team members. And he gives his priorities as values, abilities, and skills in that order. So I'm curious if a culture is a collection of values. What is the culture that you have or that you're seeking to have in your team?
Yeah, it's another really good question. I mean, I think, obviously in this environment, we want to have people that are experienced in their jobs. We would always choose work ethic and, passion for the job or heart over skill, because skill you can learn. But if they don't have a good work ethic and they're not passionate about what they're doing, then we really don't want them on our team. And so, from that point, it's pretty easy when you start entering into negotiations, and you speak to the team members and you start talking about what they're passionate about and what they believe in. If the final piece of the puzzle that you talk about is the amount that they want to be paid, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be hired, because it's the two previous ones that are the most important. And we've been fortunate that we've hired a lot of people that that have come from other teams, have taken decreases in their salaries to be part of what we're doing. Our design team had offers from Team Ineos and from Rossa, and they waited for us to get our act together to see if we were actually going to be able to mount this challenge. And so when you have a designer and everything that he brings sitting there waiting for you when they have two other job offers that are ready to be signed and committed to, that in itself speaks volumes about who you're surrounding yourself with. And so whether it's spoken about every single day or you just live it by your actions, I can see that a lot of times we're living it by our actions, and that's what you need. I mean,
Another question from the audience.
Yeah, basically you talked a little bit about what happens at low speeds. Can you talk a little bit about high speed? What's your kind of maximum range that you expect to be sailing in? And what's the kind of conditions in Auckland at that time of year that you expect to see?
That's a great question. I mean, the nice thing about the boat is it's relatively underpowered for its size. And so the boat will sail a lot better in 22 to 25 knots of breeze than it will in 10 knots of breeze. And in Auckland in that time of year, it can be a little bit on or off, but the timing of the regatta is going to be from 4 to 6 p.m. for the match. And so reasonably good chances of southwest sea breezes where they have a setup in the harbor, and you're targeting a 10 to 22 knot range, really. Sea state that we talked about actually last night, sea state can be, it's not as much of a worry on that race course. And if we have northerly directions in New Zealand, then they have the ability to duck in behind some of the islands and continue to sail in the flat water. But it's been interesting upwind, the boat in a sea state, in a 2 to 3 foot sea state, upwind, it's not necessarily an issue, but downwind you can feel the foil porpoising a little bit, and it changes how you sail the boat. You can't push the boat as hard because you can't have the rudder elevator breach, because then it's a big crash pretty quickly.
How close to the wind are you sailing the boat?
It's much like the catamarans. Upwind's around 50, and downwind, 135 true. So, and the difference between apparent wind, upwind is, 19 to 23. It's about that much of jib sheet ease. So,
Mallory Cup winner and brilliant artist Jimmy DeWitt. Question.
All right.
How many people on board? What's the crew?
So we have 11 on the AC-75. So there's a helmsman, main trimmer, foil trimmer, and then the rest of us are heads down grinding and occasionally looking at a computer screen and heads out of the boat a little bit for tactics. And in the mule, we have 5 of us.
That answered my second question. Where does the grunt come from for the energy?
Yeah.
So you're grinding.
Yeah. So the grunt, well, we actually, yesterday, the majority of the grinding corps, we've been incredibly fortunate because we've had, with the delay in boat 1, basically the grinding team really has had the last 9 months to train. And that's afforded us the opportunity where we have 6 grinders right now that have obtained a level that the previous athletes were just at once they got to the match. And we haven't even started sailing the boat yet. And we have athletes that are already ahead of that curve. They're anticipating 35-minute races, so the races will be roughly 13 minutes longer than what they were in Bermuda. And so that is going to be a whipping. The foil cant system is battery operated and supplied, so we don't have to operate that system, but we do have to operate a lot of the controls for the sail trim, for the twist controls, and for the elements in and around the boat that need oil that the grinders are going to produce.
How long does it take to get the foil up?
On the 75, I think it's a 7-second from the water, but that's all battery powered.
Right.
So
7 seconds to get it up?
Yeah,
7
so
seconds
from-
to get it back down?
yeah.
Okay. Bruce Monroe has a question. Bruce, Staff Commodore Bruce Monroe.
Hey, Bruce.
It's
Good to see you.
Terry. Thanks for coming. The America's Cup deed of gift provides that the America's Cup is to be a competition between nations and yacht clubs. And during all the years that the New York Yacht Club held it, those two provisions, I think, were pretty well observed. In the more recent matches, in my opinion, those two provisions have gotten pretty short shrift. But this time around, it seems to be they're making a comeback. You've got a nationality requirement this time around. And I think you guys are to be congratulated on choosing a first-rate yacht club as your sponsoring yacht club for America's Cup. Not everyone in your position would have done that.
Thank you.
And so I wonder if you would care to comment on those two provisions and sort of the change that we've seen this time around.
Yeah. Well, as you point out, 7 of the sailors on board have to be U.S. citizens and passport holders. Obviously, we have Dean Barker as a helmsman, and he's been a resident in our country for the last 4 years, and Paul Goodison, who's British. But I'm proud of the fact that right now, 70% of our sailing team is, born and bred here in the United States, and it's a balance between to execute our plan, we have to win the regatta, and to further it, we have to win the regatta, and so we need to make sure that where we didn't have talent in our, that we could see inside our country, that we made sure that we had it on the boat. And secondly, we needed to make sure that we had people that fit what we were talking about earlier, which is the values of the athlete, the values of the worker. And it's not easy. I mean, as you rightfully point out, it is a balance. And at the same time, I having the opportunity to represent our country and to represent the New York Yacht Club in the manner that we are, I'm incredibly proud of our entire team, because they represent exactly what we're doing, and that side of it's important. But it's a great question, and it's one that I sincerely appreciate, because it is something that's very close to us. And the goal for the defense, if we're fortunate enough to ever get there, is to be able to hand it off to a younger generation that fits exactly what you're talking about.
A question in the audience from Eula Levicki. Eula.
Thank you. Please address the difference of losing the electronics upwind versus downwind. Thank you.
Losing the electronics? Yeah, that is not going to go well. You're going to be good on one jibe and you'll be in the water on the other. And that's the interesting thing about this boat. And when you think about backup, for anybody in the room who's a pilot, you have redundancy on the airplane, and you have backup for the backup for the backup. And probably one of our most valuable team members is the gentleman who does all the logic for the boat in the morning, who programs the boat in the morning. He went to deal with the IRS a couple weeks ago and wasn't on the water, and we had an issue, and his backup wasn't fully up to speed to what we were doing on the day, and we basically had to stop sailing because the logic inside the boat wasn't doing what the sailors needed it to do. So in a very simple way, having that type of skill, it's incredible to see what goes into the day to get the boat ready for 4 hours of sailing. If we're off the dock at 11:30 and back on the dock at 3:30, their day starts at 6 a.m. to prepare the boat and to put the boat through its checks to go sailing on the day. So it's quite a intensive operation. That's something that all the team members that have come from the previous regatta that have commented that the mule is a lot more reliable than the AC-50 ever was. You know, in the best of times, they were getting 3 days a week out of sailing the AC-50, and in the mule, you know, over the course of since we launched in October, we're achieving about 65% success rate on the water. And then, you know, when we're not on the water, we haven't lost a day going off the dock. We've lost days on the water to things failing, but we haven't lost a day going off the dock because of a system failure. So in that regard, it's proven to be quite good.
So boat number 1 goes in the water when?
So as of today, got word that the ballot for the foil arms will be in and around July the 10th. And from there, it's about 4 weeks. So I would think that by the middle of August, we'll have boat 1 in the water.
And where will you be sailing it?
In Narragansett Bay, and then out in Block Island Sound. So.
Well, we're very pleased today to have Tucker Thompson, America's Cup commentator, and Terry Hutchinson, skipper and executive director, as our guests at the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. It's been terrific for you guys to share your great story with us. We're behind you. We want you to do well, and congratulations. With that, the luncheon is adjourned.
All right. Thank you.
Want you to do well.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
And we're going to hand out a hat to the Commodore. Commodore Heineken.